Hi there, I'm Isobel, and I'd like to help you answer the question, how many nines? Canines. Been working with the SLOs for a while now, and currently do so as an SRE Discord. I've also recently become a full-time underling to Her Royal Highness Mischa, the Queen of Sheba. Naturally, I want to keep Mischa as happy as I possibly can, even if I can't always be perfect. I found it really helpful to approach pet parenting through the lens of SLOs. I hope some of the lessons help you, too. Lesson 1. SLOs should be informed by your customers, but set by you. It's vital that your SLOs are informed by and based on your actual customer needs. However, that doesn't mean that you should let your customers set them directly for you, or you might end up with SLOs that can lead to some pretty unexpected, unintended consequences. For instance, if Mischa were to receive a new toy every day, she might like that, but my wallet wouldn't. Likewise, if she got nonstop belly rubs, I wouldn't have any time to do anything else. And if she got unlimited access to treats, it might not be the best for her health. If I never left her home alone, I wouldn't be able to go places like the grocery store, let alone anywhere else. And if I let her play with cats and other critters, she might have a great time, but they probably wouldn't. Lesson 2. You need to use your error budgets to adjust thresholds and make future releases safer. Sometimes you might have an objective that you'd like to meet, but your infrastructure just can't meet it yet. Or you can meet it today, but you couldn't continue doing so if you were to introduce new features or ramp up traffic a bunch. My ideal would be that Mischa can happily go anywhere and everywhere with me. The first few days home with me, though, we had to adjust our expectations a bit. Day 1 in a new home is a big experience for any dog. Mischa and I were quite lucky that we already knew each other well, since I used to walk her for her previous person. She'd never been to a city before, though, and suddenly she found herself confronted with a brand new environment filled with all kinds of new sights, sounds, and smells. Since she was so tense even at home, keeping her comfortable for the majority of the day was basically impossible. I needed to set a threshold that would account for a higher than ideal baseline level of stress, with room for some number of minutes where she'd realistically be pretty freaked out. Likewise, anywhere and everywhere was totally out of the question if we were going to meet even that barest comfort level, since she was not super at ease even at home. So we adjusted our SLO to something that was actually attainable and built up from there. We spent hours walking back and forth down empty laneways at off hours, then quiet streets, then small parks, and so on. Whenever I saw Mischa starting to get stressed out again, I'd turn that feature flag back off and go back to her relative comfort zone, whether that meant cutting the walk short and taking her out again later, or going back to somewhere that she was more familiar with. Then I'd cautiously test the new place out again only when we had enough room left in our air budget, or stress budget in this case. We've since scaled up enough to maintain new features or locations, as it may be. Mischa loves joining me these days to run all kinds of errands, visit friends, and explore different places, COVID allowing. She used to spend her days in an antique store, so she's also now developed a bit of a shopping obsession, tries to drag me into every store that we walk past, which is a little bit of an unexpected twist. We're now starting to learn about doggy friends and being polite to other dogs, especially when visiting their homes. This is our first doggy friend visit. At their place, that is. Lesson 2, setting appropriate instant response. Some SLOs require more stringent instant response than others. Maybe they're backed by strict SLAs or other similarly unambiguous requirements. Maybe they're for particularly essential pieces of functionality. Vet care is kind of like that. I need to make sure that Mischa is up to date on her vaccines and that her health is checked out regularly so that we can become aware of any issues before they get worse. We can't be lax about things like vaccines, but there is maybe a bit of a tolerance level where, we know that it is coming in advance, and so we can set the appointment before it gets too late. Health SLOs are necessarily strict and need quick correction before they get even a bit in the red. As with software incidents, it's invaluable to have protocols planned and validated in advance of them actually becoming necessary. We needed to make an emergency vet visit a few weeks after Mischa became mine, which meant that at 2 a.m. I was scrambling to find a dog-friendly cab and figuring out the nearest clinic that could see her. Quickly, that was. It did thankfully turn out to be a very minor issue in the end. Better safe than sorry. But for urgent issues, you really want to make sure that you have plans in place and that you can meet them, even if not every issue requires them. Sorry, Mischa, for the blackmail photo. Other problems are more slow burning. You know that you need to deal with them and that you need to deal with them soon, but you don't necessarily need to stay up all hours to deal with them today. For instance, it turned out that Mischa was overdue for some dental work when I got her. Unfortunately, it seems that every other dog in the city also needs dental work, so it's been hard to get an appointment. We reduced the urgency by putting her on special dental food and giving her various other treatments like greenies and brushing her teeth and so on. At her most recent vet appointment, following that, her vet also confirmed that some of that has been helping, and it's less urgent than it was when I first got her. Now, we did finally get an appointment, but then it got pushed back a few weeks. And since at this point it's gone on quite a while, we decided that it would make the most sense to schedule one with a different vet from the same clinic. Your customers care that you're not meeting their needs, whether or not the reasons you aren't currently meeting them boils down to vendor issues. If that's the case, or if it's something else that is not entirely under your control, it's up to you to find a workaround solution rather than let your SLO keep slipping farther and farther into the red. Next lesson. Your customers probably won't tell you that 116 milliseconds is the perfect latency and that they'll get antsy if 0.03% of requests are slower than that. But that 112 milliseconds would be fine. And if you do try asking them about what latency or what success rate would be fine, they'll likely simply simplify their answer to something like, always super fast, please. Similarly, dogs can't exactly articulate exactly how much exercise they need. I told myself at first that I needed to walk Mischa for at least an hour and a half to 2 hours every day, or else for some ambiguous conclusion to that sentence. That was a pretty arbitrary threshold, though. Giving myself an objective of meeting it 100% of the time wasn't exactly a recipe for success. What about when there's a blizzard and the snow is deeper than Mischa is tall? What if I'm on call and spend most of the day dealing with fires? What if we're both having an off day? I went from every day having to walk her at least an hour and a half to most days. I also now measure it on more of a monthly cadence than a weekly one to accommodate for things like being on call, getting sick, and so on. I also try to keep an eye out for long tails, which in this case translates to short walks. If our minimum walk length, which is to say our long tail of walk lengths, gets too low, would be a clear sign that I need to look for something like a dog walker or a different solution. Meanwhile, we can make our system more resilient to days that are necessarily short days, like bad weather, with things like enrichment toys and other indoor activities. In this picture, for example, Mischa is helping me debug our database issues. We tackle database issues together so that she doesn't feel too left out. Sometimes you also need to pay special attention to different endpoints or customers, even if they're a lower portion of traffic. Similarly, I try to make sure that we get a few extra good days in each month where we go on particularly long walks and check out new places. We have a different mental SLO for that in our dog walking heads. Next lesson. Well, same lesson, sorry. It's helpful to adjust based on actually observed data. Since Mischa, like most users, won't tell me whether I'm exactly meeting her needs, I need to watch for indirect data to tell whether I am or not. Things like excess energy, how frequently she reaches the point of asking for a walk, and so on. I also discovered that Mischa is a secret fan of sleeping in, so I no longer need to rush out the door at 6 a.m. to get her out for her first walk. I still try to walk her the same amount, but we don't necessarily have to go out quite so early. It turns out that she likes to get lots of couch time and belly rubs before her first walk, so these days I can maybe have coffee first, actually. These are all pictures from me trying to get her out for her first walk, where I am literally dragging her out the door. Thanks for listening. Hope that it helped. Hope that it was informative.